Today, we are talking about carbs. Ladies, if you think cutting carbs is the key to fat loss over 40, think again. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down why giving up carbs is actually sabotaging your weight loss, especially for you ladies in your 40s and your 50s and beyond. If you're tired, you're low on energy, you're stuck in that start over cycle, you're constantly craving food, eliminating carbs could be the reason why. So we're going to get to the bottom of this today. And hey, if we haven't met before, I'm Becky Fox. I'm a fitness and nutrition coach. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. And during that time, I've helped thousands of women sustainably lose the weight and keep it off. Guess what? Without having to cut out carbs. All right. And hey, if you want to get more out of this and learn ways to lose the fat that are sustainable, drop checklists down below and I'll send you over my fat loss checklist. It's step by step the things that you need to start doing in order to see better results from your fitness and your nutrition and your recovery, because all these three things are important when it comes to fat loss. All right, let's dive into why giving up carbs are keeping you stuck. Okay, and stick around to the end because I'm going to share with you what you should be doing when it comes to carbs instead. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and dive in. As you're hopping in, say hello. All right. So number one is I really want to talk about hormones. Okay. Because one of the things, the reason that when we start to get in our 40s and our 50s, we hit perimenopause, we hit menopause, our hormones are changing whether we like it or not. Okay. It is just a part of life. And so a lot of times, maybe you used to do low carb when you were younger. I know when I was in my 20s, I did low carb and it worked well for a while. Now, it backfired for me because it was too restrictive. But from a hormone standpoint, I could do these harsh things to my body, like low carbs and exercising twice a day and working out 6 days a week and crushing my body. But as we get older, things start to shift. Okay. Our progesterone and our estrogen decline, right? Our cortisol, because of the progesterone decline, we become more sensitive to stress, right? We become more insulin sensitive. So all these things can impact our results that we're getting from our fat loss routine. So first of all, we do become more insulin resistant, right? And that just means that, yeah, we don't tolerate carbs as easily as we did when we were younger. So yeah, maybe you could eat carbs and now it feels like you look at a carb and gain weight. Sometimes that's the shifts that happens. Now, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be eating carbs at all and that we have to avoid them like the plague because they're the enemy. We just have to be mindful how we do it. And I'm going to talk about that at the end of today's video. Okay. But first of all, what's one of the really huge benefits to carbs that a lot of people forget is that it's our primary source of fuel, right? So if you're trying low carb or you've tried it in the past and you notice like your energy tanked, you're working out and maybe you just feel like you can't push as hard. Maybe even you notice your sleep wasn't as well, right? There can be a lot of impacts. And a lot of times what people forget is we just kind of, okay, low carb works. I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to suck it up, even though I feel awful, right? But a lot of times these signs like having no energy and not sleeping well and right, barely being able to get through your workout, these are signs that what you're doing is not really ideal, especially in the long term, because how long are you going to stick to something that makes you feel like crap? Okay. Like it's going to have a shelf life and it's not going to stick. Okay. So carbs are great for fuel, for energizing us, to help us feel our best throughout the day, to get into those workouts and be able to really push, right? And when we're pushing in those workouts and we're challenging ourselves, we get more out of those workouts. So the benefit of having lots of energy and having lots of fuel is we can push harder in the gym. We can get better results from the workouts that we're doing. But I don't know about you. When I did low carb too, I was like tired all the time, no way to live. I was cranky pants, right? And so it's no way to live, right? So we want to fuel our body. We want to give it the gas that it needs to go. Right. And carbs themselves are not the thing that's going to make us fat. So, we forget that it's not just about carbs, it's about eating too much. So I'll get to that here in just a second. Okay. But second, another aspect of this is, one of the things that's really important is to make sure we're getting the nutrients our body needs, right? Fiber, antioxidants, phytonutrients, all these amazing things, especially from fruits and veggies. And I see a lot of people, they become scared of fruits. They become scared of vegetables because they have carbs in them. Okay. Yeah. Can we technically live without carbs? We can. Doesn't mean we're living optimally. Doesn't mean we're living our best life. And as women, our body does react to lower carbs differently than men. When we circle back to the hormones, I've seen women do like keto and they end up with a lower thyroid, right? Because we need those carbs for our thyroid, for that energy creation. And so, and we need those nutrients. Our body needs those nutrients. So if we're going low carb, a lot of times we're cutting out fiber and the things that our body needs for our gut to be healthy, for our, to optimize our hormones, to optimize our metabolism. And again, just to feel our best. Okay. So, if we're dropping carbs at the expense of getting the things our body needs, it's going to catch up to us at some point. Okay. And also, when it comes to hormones, I mentioned a little bit earlier, we are more sensitive to stress. Okay. It is what it is. It sucks, right? Like our body, we could get away with doing these extreme things and beating up our body when we were younger. But as we get older, for a lot of us, these things just don't work anymore. And when we become really super stressed out, not just like, I know we think of stress of like, right? I'm like work stressful. I have a lot going on, but there's also physiological stress that we put on our body. Okay. We have enough of the mental stress from everyday life, but we're only compounding it when we're doing things like eating low calories, cutting out carbs, cutting out whole food groups, exercising 6 days a week for 2 hours at a time. Okay. Our body can't handle the stuff the same way that it used to. This is why if you used to do a lot of these things, it's not working anymore. Okay, it's backfiring. We have to change our approach when we start to hit perimenopause and menopause. Okay, because our body can't handle the stress of this. And because when I'm in my 20s, I didn't have a lot of mental stress either, as much as I do now that I'm older. Right? You got kids, you got work, you got all these, aging parents, all this stuff. So when you already have a lot of mental stress and you're compounding it with like going low carb or going low calories, our body perceives that as a threat. It goes, hey, like food is scarce. We're not getting in what we need. Like let's ramp up the cortisol. And there's a lot of issues with when cortisol's off and it's high and we're super stressed. We're going to store belly fat more because our body's worried we're not getting what it needs. So it's going to make sure to protect our organs and we're going to end up with more belly fat, right? You're going to feel more tired. Again, you're not going to have the energy for your workouts. Like all this stuff just plays in together, right? Your sleep probably starts to go to crap. You might feel kind of tired in the mornings, wiry at night. Like all these things are going to impact your results in the long run if we're not taking recovery and stress management into account. So any fat loss program should be accounting for these things. And one way is physically with the plan that we're on. Are we taking a more moderate approach to our fat loss, being in a small calorie deficit? Yeah, we can't just go eat any carbs we feel like, but maybe taking more of a moderate approach to the carbs that we're intaking. Are we getting the nutrients, the fiber, the healthy stuff that we need from things like fruits and vegetables and even potatoes and all that kind of stuff, right? And so that's going to be really, really key to helping us feel our best. And we have to think about things like carbs and fiber and nutrients and protein and all this stuff we're getting from our food as building blocks to help our metabolism work at its best, to help our hormones work at its best, okay? To allow our body to thrive. And if we're spending, months and months and months in these deprivation states, it's going to backfire at some point. Your body's going to, this is when you start to notice that the fatigue gets extreme, or I've heard people's hair falling out and things like this, right? So listen to those signs. And honestly, for any women in their 40s and 50s, I don't suggest low carb. We don't have to be low carb in order to lose fat, okay? Now, what is the number one requirement for fat loss is being in a calorie deficit. Okay. So you can have carbs and lose fat. You can have fat and lose fat. You can eat protein and lose fat as long as you're not eating too much of that stuff. Okay. So it's not carbs themselves that's the evil thing. It's just that it's easy for us to overeat them and end up eating too many calories, right? Especially when it comes to like processed foods and sugary drinks and things like that. Okay, so yeah, we have to be mindful about where we're getting those carb sources, and are we eating stuff that we can, right? Like you can drink a soda with 45 carbs and not feel like you had a single thing. It has no fill factor, it has no stick factor, right? So what we eat matters too. But if we're not in a calorie deficit, we're not going to lose weight. Even if you're eating low carb and you're eating too much fat and your calories are too high, guess what? You're not going to lose fat. All right. So we still have to be in a calorie deficit. So the second big thing that I want to talk about is, so there's the hormonal piece, right? There's the fact that we need to be in a calorie deficit. There's also a psychological piece, right? Which is, this was a big one for me, is that restrict and binge cycle. Okay. Now, when I gave up carbs, so I remember my first like really extreme kind of strict diets really, really well. I believe it was like maybe a 4-month plan, somewhere around like 3 or 4 months, maybe a little bit longer. And it was 1,400 calories. It was low carbs. It was low fat. It was like 200 grams of protein, at least, I think. It was insane, right? I could only eat like plain chicken breast, egg whites, plain oatmeal, right? All those things. And what happened is, as soon as, and probably some of you guys have heard the story before, as soon as I went off that diet, right? This was for a competition. Okay. So I was doing a competition. I got on stage, and as soon as I got off, my friend had bought me a bag of Oreos. I ate the whole thing in 2 days. And it didn't stop there. It wasn't like I just got back on track on Monday, man. This spiraled into like months of me eating crap. This is the first time in my life I actually ever binge ate. Before I started doing these extreme diets, I actually ate pretty normal. So the restriction and the low carb, what happens is the more we go one way, it tends to ping pong the other way and have a huge impact that other way. So that's what happened to me. I went on to binge eat and then diet again, and then binge eat and then diet again. And it became this cycle, right? Because the approach that I was taking, it wasn't me. I thought I lacked willpower. It didn't have anything to do with my willpower. It had everything to do with the fact that I was trying to restrict so much. Like, who's going to fight that for? Like, none of us. We only have so much willpower and energy for that crap to go around, right? And then when we're running around like hungry with cravings all the time and malnourished because we're not getting what our body needs, and right, especially now, I think my cortisol would be through the roof trying to do something like this, right? It's going to backfire. So the more you restrict, the more we tell ourselves we can't have something, the more deprived we feel. What's going to happen? We're going to want it even more on the other side. And then when we fall off the wagon, right, which is what I did, right, we go, well, I haven't had it. Let me eat all of it now because I'm going to start over on Monday, right? Instead of taking a moderate approach where it's like, no, I don't have to start over on Monday because I'm not going to cut carbs out of my diet on Monday. I can still have carbs. I still have room for things that I love and enjoy in my diet. So I never get to this place of feeling deprived that I feel like I have to stuff my face with everything in sight. Okay, so if your approach isn't sustainable, neither are your results, right? So if you're looking at dropping your carbs out as a means to do something for 8 weeks, and then you're going to go back to doing what you're doing before, well, what do you think is going to happen? Right? Of course, you're going to gain all that weight back, right? Because if you go back to doing what you did before, that's what got you where you are. Okay, so if the approach that we're taking has an end date, has a shelf life, what do you like? So your results. That's just how it works. So we have to approach this from a sustainable approach of like, I have to change my habits. I have to change my lifestyle. Do I want to give up carbs for the rest of my life? I sure as hell don't. I know I don't, and I'm not going to, and I love my carbs, right? And so we want to make sure that a plan works around our real life. And if we want to be able to have carbs, if we like chocolate, if we want to have tacos sometimes, if we don't have to stress about going to a birthday party or out to dinner because these things are going to be around, let's make them part of your plan so that we're not always falling off the wagon, coming back on and off, on and off, on and off, right? Can anybody relate to that cycle? Right? Totally been there a million times, okay? So how do we include carbs? Okay, so how do we do this? Because I know for some of you, if you've been low carb for a long time, it's scary, right? Because we've been told for so long that carbs are bad and they're the devil and they're evil, and we think we're going to balloon up and gain a bunch of weight when we bring in carbs. And I will be honest, if you've been following low carb for a long time and you add some carbs into your diet, you will gain weight on a scale because when we have more carbs in our diet, we hold more water, right, in our muscles. It's not a bad thing if you can't even tell it's there. Right. So people sometimes freak out thinking, oh, as soon as I added carbs back in, I ballooned up. Well, it's just because your muscles and your body's holding more water because there's water in those carbs. Okay. But that's a great thing. When we have carbs in our muscles, right, it gives us energy to strengthen, to work out, to do our things. And so we don't want to avoid the carbs, you guys. So if you've been doing low carb, just slowly transition back in. It also doesn't mean you have to go like add carbs in every single meal tomorrow. Maybe just start with one meal. Maybe just start with a little bit of fruit in your breakfast. Okay. So rather than avoiding them, in going low carb, it's just thinking more moderate carb. Okay. We do have to reel it in. We can't just eat, 5,000 carbs a day and expect to get results. Right. But we don't have to cut them out. We just have to be mindful about how much we're having into the day if we do want to see fat loss. Okay. And we can focus on the types of carbs that we're having. Right. Not all carbs are exactly the same. Right. Certain carbs, right. If you have potatoes, are going to fill you up and stick with you longer, right? Especially if you add some protein and some vegetables to that meal than say just having, a Mountain Dew or eating a candy bar or something like that, right? They're all carbs, yes, even if they have the same calories, right? As long as we stay in our calorie count, we're still going to lose weight. But I can tell you right now, if I eat a piece of candy, I'm going to be eating something else in 30 minutes because I'm going to be hungry again because it's not going to stick with me. So it's going to be really easy for me to overeat. Okay. So the type of carbs you're consuming are going to make a difference. We want to focus on whole carbs, fruits, vegetables, squash, potatoes, rice. Yes, you can even have bread, right? But, and I still eat like a good sourdough bread or have a tortilla wrap every once in a while. But I also do like whole grain wheat bread that has a good amount of protein and fiber in it. Okay. And so it doesn't mean we can never have that stuff. And yes, I still have sweets. And yes, I still don't always eat the best options, right? But I try to do that less often than more often. And then that other 80-90% of the time, I'm trying to get more whole foods into what I'm doing. Okay. So we would just want to think, it's not that carbs are bad. We just want to focus on being mindful about how much we're having, have a plan for that. This is why I love tracking macros, because we can, see how much we're getting in. We can be mindful of those choices, right? And we can even set a goal for ourselves, right? The type of carbs that you're having in the day is going to make a big difference as well, right? Whole foods versus processed foods, carbs that have more fiber in them that make it stick with you longer. And honestly, if you're having carbs, I would suggest eating them in a meal. Have them with protein, have them with fiber, so it keeps your blood sugar stable, because that's going to help a lot with your energy as well. And then we just want to think about, how does it fit into my day? Okay, so when I have clients come on board, we do track macros for a while because I want them to see what they're getting, right? It's really hard, especially nowadays with all this like processed foods and just things we have a lot of foods we eat that aren't, right out of the ground, right? And so it's really easy to not realize how many calories are in things, or thinking we're eating enough protein and we're not, or thinking we're doing okay on carbs and not realizing we're eating way more than we thought. So I'm a huge fan of tracking. It's not something that has to be done forever and ever, but it is very eye-opening to start to gauge, how much am I actually getting in? Okay. So the first thing I would suggest is just start tracking and see where you're at now. You might be surprised to find that you're eating way more calories or way more carbs or not enough protein, or your fiber sucks, right? I talked to somebody yesterday and she's like, my fiber is 10 grams a day. And I'm like, oh my God, we got to work on that. Right. And so by logging, it's a tool that helps us learn about what we're eating. Right. So for you guys that are like, oh, I don't want to track, that's too much work, blah, blah, blah. We want to think about it as an opportunity to learn what we're eating, to be able to make changes based on what we're already doing. Okay. And a lot of times when I have clients track, we set a calorie goal, we set a protein goal, and actually give them some flexibility on the carbs and fats. I don't even suggest that they stick to a very strict number on this. If they're hitting their calorie goal, I don't really care necessarily, as long as they're not going into either extreme, how much carbs or fat they're getting. Because what I do is I allow them to have some flexibility, because some people do like a little bit more carbs. They like the volume. They like to have more fruits and things like that. Other people, they like the rich and the fatty stuff. So maybe they might eat more fat and a little less carbs. And that's okay, but we're still getting both of those things in there. We're not going 0 carbs and all fats, or all fats and 0 carbs, or whatever, vice versa. I think I said the same thing twice. So you get the idea. So I don't even usually suggest a carb or fat number they stick to, as long as they're hitting their protein and their calorie goals. And they're just being mindful that those two things aren't either extreme. Okay. So you can think about how it fits into your day. So what I love to do is, if somebody's tracking, right, and they're like, I had my birthday last week and I had some birthday cake and I was going to eat the birthday cake. So I worked around it. I logged that in my food log so that I could plan the rest of the day around still having that treat. So we can still have treats. We still can have desserts, right? One of the best ways to do it is just plan it into your day so you can still stick to your goals and just make room for that stuff, right? Maybe you're not going to eat as many carbs at dinner because you know that cake has a lot of sugar in it. Okay. And then instead of maybe eating it by itself, you have it as dessert with dinner so that it doesn't spike your insulin and then leave you with a blood sugar crash. Okay. So it's about how we do it, how we fit it into our day, right? Is going to be the key to making it sustainable and making sure, yes, we want to focus on whole foods, but allow some room for fun. Because if we don't allow that room for fun, it's going to backfire, right? What we talked about, that binge restrict. And we don't want to stay stuck in those cycles. Otherwise, we're never going to move forward. Okay. All right. That's all I got for you guys today. Hopefully, I've convinced you a little bit that carbs are not the devil. So drop a line below and let me know. Let me know what stood out to you from today's video. And of course, if you want to grab my fat loss checklist, just drop checklist down below. I'll get that sent over to you. It has my top steps to start implementing to start seeing fat loss right away. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you back